Some secrets weren't meant to stay buried. Eleanor Washington, a seemingly ordinary teacher with extraordinary skills, wore her jade pendant like armor, hiding in plain sight for 3 decades. Her classified past locked away in redacted files, her lethal intelligence dulled by necessity. Then Richard Kensington and his dealership made their fatal miscalculation. A dismissal. A humiliation. An elderly black woman escorted out for daring to browse luxury cars. They couldn't recognize the calculated patience behind her dignified eyes, the strategic mind that had outmaneuvered governments, the precision with which she documented each insult. Now the tactician resurfaces, as her estranged billionaire son returns, and a decades-old conspiracy unravels, the truth emerges. Eleanor Washington wasn't protecting herself from Kensington's network. She was protecting the world from what she helped create. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Eleanor Washington adjusted her worn but meticulously clean coat as she stepped off the city bus. At 72, her movements remained deliberate and dignified, despite the arthritis that had settled into her joints years ago. She touched the jade pendant hanging from her neck, a ritual that had brought her comfort for decades, before walking toward the gleaming glass facade of Prestige Motors. The dealership stood like a monument to wealth in downtown Atlanta, its showroom filled with vehicles that cost more than Eleanor's entire pension. Still, after 5 years of saving, meticulous budgeting, and foregoing small luxuries, she had finally accumulated enough for a sensible, reliable car. Her old Buick had finally given up 3 months ago, and the bus routes were becoming increasingly difficult to navigate with her condition. "Just remember who you are, Eleanor," she whispered to herself as she approached the entrance. "You have every right to be here." As she reached for the door, she noticed a man in a dark suit watching her from across the parking lot. Their eyes met briefly before he turned away, seemingly talking into his sleeve. Eleanor's posture stiffened. After all this time, they were still watching. She shouldn't be surprised. Inside, the showroom gleamed with polished marble floors and recessed lighting that made the vehicles shine like jewels. A young receptionist glanced up, her practiced smile faltering slightly as she assessed Eleanor's modest appearance. "Welcome to Prestige Motors," she said, her tone lacking the warmth it would undoubtedly hold for other customers. "Can I help you?" Eleanor stood taller. "Yes, I have an appointment with Sales Director Gregory Pierce." The lie slipped out easily, a small deception that felt necessary after being dismissed at 2 other dealerships last week. "Mr. Pierce?" The receptionist checked her computer screen with narrowed eyes. "I don't see an appointment," he assured me. "He would be available this morning," Eleanor said with quiet confidence. Perhaps it was entered incorrectly. The receptionist's smile tightened. "Mr. Pierce is in a meeting, but I can have Bradley assist you." Minutes later, a young man approached with the reluctant air of someone who'd drawn the short straw. His name tag identified him as Bradley Wilson, Junior Sales Associate. "Ma'am," he said, the word sounding more like an insult than a courtesy. "What exactly were you looking to see today?" Eleanor noted his dismissive tone, but maintained her composure. "I'm interested in the Aurora SE sedan. I've researched its safety features and fuel efficiency extensively." Bradley raised an eyebrow. "That's one of our mid-range models. Perhaps something more economical would be better suited to your needs." "The Aurora meets my requirements perfectly," Eleanor replied, unwrapping a folder from her purse. "I've prepared all my financial documentation and credit information." As she spoke, Eleanor noticed papers on a nearby desk, financial statements, with red figures that caught her attention. Years of scanning documents for hidden information had left her with the ability to absorb details quickly. The dealership appeared to be struggling, despite its opulent facade. "Let me show you our economy section first," Bradley suggested, ignoring her folder. Eleanor followed him past luxury vehicles, noticing how other salespeople engaged enthusiastically with well-dressed customers. As they walked, Bradley barely explained features, offering clipped responses to her knowledgeable questions about torque and engine capacity. You seem surprised by my questions, Eleanor observed. Bradley looked uncomfortable. Most customers are more concerned with color and entertainment systems. I taught automotive engineering to underprivileged youth after retiring from my main teaching career, she explained. A program that was mysteriously defunded 10 years ago, despite its success. Bradley seemed unsettled by this information, his eyes darting to a security guard near the entrance. Eleanor followed his gaze and noticed a wall of framed photographs. Behind the guard, one photo featured a distinguished gray-haired man receiving an award, surrounded by city officials. Her heart nearly stopped. Richard Kensington. The nameplate beneath the photo identified him as the owner and CEO of Prestige Motors. The same Richard Kensington whose son she had taught decades ago, and whose connection to her past went far deeper than a parent-teacher relationship. "Is that Mr. Kensington?" she asked, keeping her voice casual despite the surge of adrenaline. "Yes, our owner," Bradley replied. "He was named Businessman of the Year last year." "How appropriate," Eleanor murmured, her mind racing with connections. She'd spent years mapping. As Bradley led her toward the economy vehicles, a sharp-dressed woman intercepted them. Her name tag identified her as Vanessa Mitchell, sales manager. "Bradley, I'll take over from here," she said with a tight smile. Then, to Eleanor, "I understand you're interested in the Aurora?" "That's correct," Eleanor confirmed, offering her folder again. "I've prepared all my documentation." Vanessa glanced at the paperwork, her eyes widening slightly when she saw Eleanor's name. Something like recognition and alarm flickered across her face. "Mrs. Washington, is it?" Vanessa's tone had shifted subtly. "Would you excuse me for just a moment?" Eleanor watched as Vanessa stepped away, making a phone call with her back turned. The conversation was brief but intense, with Vanessa glancing back at Eleanor several times. When she returned, 2 security guards flanked her. "Mrs. Washington, I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Vanessa said, her professional demeanor now icy. "We don't believe we have a vehicle that meets your needs today." "I disagree," Eleanor replied calmly. "The Aurora SE is exactly what I need, and I have the financial means to purchase it." "Nevertheless, we're going to have to ask you to leave," Vanessa insisted. "We have the right to refuse service." One guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, please come with us." "On what grounds?" Eleanor demanded, though she suspected this had nothing to do with car buying. Vanessa lowered her voice. "Protocol requires us to implement the Washington situation containment. Please don't make this difficult." The row. Words sent a chill through Eleanor. They knew exactly who she was. As the guards moved to escort her out, the main office door opened. Richard Kensington himself emerged, his commanding presence causing conversations around the showroom to quieten. His eyes locked with Eleanor's for a moment. Recognition, shock, and then cold calculation passing across his face before he deliberately turned away. "Make sure she doesn't come back," he instructed a security guard. "No exceptions." Eleanor maintained her dignity as they escorted her to the exit, keeping her back straight and her head high despite the stares from other customers. Decades of training had taught her how to hide emotions that might betray weakness. Outside in the bright sunlight, a young black woman approached. She was in her early 30s, professionally dressed, with intelligent eyes that assessed Eleanor's situation. Quickly, "Are you all right, ma'am?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. "I'm fine, thank you," Eleanor replied, her instincts on high alert. This seemed too convenient. "I'm Zoe Taylor," the woman offered, extending a business card. "I teach at Westside." "Hi." Eleanor accepted the card cautiously. Turning it over, she found a handwritten note. "They did the same to my grandmother. We need to talk. It's bigger than you think." "Thank you, Ms. Taylor," Eleanor said neutrally, tucking the card away. "But I should be going." As Eleanor walked toward the bus stop, rain began to fall. She took a seat on the bench, the humiliation of the encounter washing over her along with the raindrops. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Mom, I'll be in Atlanta next week. We should talk. It's been too long. Marcus." Eleanor stared at the message from her estranged son. 8 years of minimal contact, and now he wanted to talk. As she contemplated responding, a black sedan drove slowly past her bus stop, the driver watching her intently. Eleanor clutched her jade pendant, her mind racing with implications. After all these years, they're still watching, she whispered, to herself. Marcus picked a dangerous time to return. 30,000 feet above Tennessee, Marcus Washington reviewed classified documents marked with a faded green Project Emerald watermark. The private jet's cabin was silent except for the hum of engines and the occasional ping of incoming messages on his secure tablet. At 45, Marcus had built WashTech Solutions into a tech empire valued at over $50 billion. His innovations in artificial intelligence and quantum computing had revolutionized everything from healthcare to defense systems. To the public, he was an enigmatic genius who had emerged from nowhere to reshape the technological landscape. Few knew about his classified military background or the real reasons he'd walked away from it. "Mr. Washington, we'll be landing in Atlanta in 20 minutes, his assistant announced over the intercom. Marcus nodded, securing the documents in a briefcase with a biometric lock. As he removed his jacket to prepare for landing, the holstered gun beneath his arm became briefly visible, a reminder that his tech empire wasn't his only area of expertise. His mind drifted to the last time he'd seen his mother, 8 years ago, during a brief, tense Christmas visit. Before that, their relationship had already been strained for years, following their explosive argument when he was just 22. The memory surfaced vividly. Eleanor standing in their modest living room, tears streaming down her face as she held the military enlistment papers he'd hidden from her. "You can't do this, Marcus," she had pleaded. "This isn't just about college, this program. You don't understand what you're getting into." "How would you know?" he'd shot back, young and defiant. "You're just a teacher." Her expression had changed then, hardened in a way he'd never seen before. "I know more than you think. You're looking for your father. This isn't the way to find him." "You kept me from the truth my whole life," Marcus had accused. "Told me he was dead when I know that's not the whole story. I'm going to find him my own way." Now, approaching Atlanta, Marcus wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The information he'd uncovered in recent months suggested his mother had been right to warn him, and that there was far more to Eleanor Washington than he'd ever known. The jet landed smoothly at a private airfield outside Atlanta. A nondescript black SUV waited on the tarmac. Before heading to his mother's apartment, Marcus had the driver take him to a secure storage facility where he collected additional equipment and changed into clothes that would attract less attention in his mother's neighborhood. Eleanor's apartment building looked exactly as he remembered, a modest complex in a working-class neighborhood that had seen better days. Before approaching the entrance, Marcus conducted a subtle security sweep of the perimeter, noting security camera positions and potential exit routes, habits from his military days that had never faded. Near the building entrance, he spotted fresh cigarette butts on the ground, Marlboro Reds, the same brand favored by military contractors. Someone had been watching the building. Marcus pressed the intercom for apartment 3B. "Yes?" His mother's voice crackled through the speaker, cautious and measured. "It's Marcus." A long pause. "Come up." The elevator was out of service, as usual, so Marcus took the stairs, listening carefully for any signs of surveillance. When he reached the 3rd floor, his mother was waiting in her doorway, her expression unreadable. Eleanor Washington looked both exactly as he remembered and completely different. Her hair had more gray now, and her face showed more lines, but she stood with the same straight-backed dignity she'd always possessed. The jade pendant, a fixture from his earliest memories, hung around her neck. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her eyes quickly assessing him with surprising expertise. She stepped back to allow him entry, checking the hallway before closing and double-locking the door. The apartment was smaller than he remembered, filled with the same furniture from his childhood. Books lined every available surface, and family photos chronicled a life that seemed ordinary on the surface. Marcus presented her with a boutique gift bag containing an expensive cashmere scarf. To his surprise, Eleanor immediately removed the tissue paper, examined the scarf's lining and seams with practiced efficiency, and even checked the gift bag itself before seeming satisfied. "Checking for surveillance devices?" he asked, unable to hide his surprise. "Force of habit," she replied, offering no further explanation. "Would you like some tea?" In the kitchen, Marcus noticed a hidden safe behind a swinging bookshelf that Eleanor quickly blocked from view. As she prepared tea, he observed how she positioned herself to keep him in sight at all times, another habit taught in security. "Training, not education courses." "How long are you in town?" she asked, placing a mug of tea before him. "Officially, 3 days, but I can extend it." "Why now, Marcus? After 8 years of Christmas cards and birthday calls?" "Direct and uncompromising." "Exactly," as he remembered. "I've discovered some things about Project Emerald that concern me." The mug in Eleanor's hand trembled slightly, the only visible reaction to the coded project name. "I see," she said quietly. "And what does that have to do with me?" "I think you know more than you've ever admitted," Marcus replied. "About the project, about Dad." Eleanor sighed, suddenly looking her age. "I was never just a teacher, Marcus, but that doesn't mean I wasn't a teacher at all. Those children needed me." "And what did the government need you for?" he pressed. Eleanor's eyes darted to the jade pendant she wore. It was the same shade of green as the Project Emerald watermark, something Marcus had only recently realized might not be coincidental. "Help me prepare dinner," she said instead of answering. "You still like chicken and dumplings?" In the kitchen, Marcus noticed an outdated laptop on the counter. While Eleanor chopped vegetables, he glanced at the screen and was shocked to see military-grade encryption software running in the background. "Something a former student installed to help with my online banking," Eleanor explained, noticing his interest. Her explanation rang false, but Marcus didn't press. Not yet. As they worked, Eleanor revealed fragments of information, each one reshaping Marcus's understanding of his childhood and his mother. "I've been watching Richard Kensington for years," she admitted, "tracking his activities, his connections. The car dealership is just a front, Marcus. His real business is weapons, trafficking, specialized technology sold to the highest bidder regardless of allegiance." "How do you know this?" Eleanor opened a drawer and removed a leather-bound journal. "Because I've been gathering evidence. Names, dates, shipments. He's careful, but not careful enough." Marcus flipped through pages of meticulously documented observations, code names, and connections that would impress professional intelligence officers. "You were never going to buy a car from his dealership, were you?" "I needed to see something in person," Eleanor admitted. "A confirmation. What I didn't expect was for them to recognize me." "Your car didn't just break down, did it?" Marcus asked. "The pieces falling into place." Eleanor shook her head. "Check it yourself. It's still in the garage storage unit." After dinner, Marcus examined his mother's old Buick in the building's garage. What he found chilled him. Sophisticated evidence of sabotage that matched techniques he'd encountered during his military service. Techniques only taught to a specific Black Ops unit. When he returned to the apartment, Eleanor was on the phone, speaking rapid Mandarin Chinese, a language he never knew she understood. She quickly ended the call when she saw him. "You have hotel arrangements?" she asked. "The St. Regis downtown." "Good. Keep your reservations, but don't stay there. Find somewhere else, somewhere not connected to you." She gripped his arm with surprising strength. "Watch for a silver-crowned Victoria. They've been following me for months." As Marcus prepared to leave, Eleanor added one final warning. "And Marcus, don't trust Zoe Taylor completely. She doesn't know who her real employers are." "Zoe Taylor? How do you know about her?" "Because I know everything that happens in my orbit," Eleanor replied. "I've survived this long by staying informed. I may be just a retired teacher to most of the world, but in certain circles, I'm known by a different title." "What title?" Eleanor's eyes held decades of secrets as she replied, "Some call me the principal, and tomorrow, you're going to learn why." Sunday morning arrived with golden light streaming through stained glass windows, as Marcus sat beside his mother in the third pew of Redemption Baptist Church. The congregation was predominantly black, many elderly members greeting Eleanor with warm familiarity. What struck Marcus immediately was how many people remembered him despite his long absence. Elderly women patted his hand, commenting on how proud they were of Eleanor's boy who made good. Men his father's age shook his hand, firmly, mentioning specific achievements from his career that had been featured in business magazines. "Your mother keeps us all updated on your success," explained Mrs. Gladys Johnson, who had lived in their apartment building since Marcus was a child. "She brings newspaper clippings to every service." The realization that his mother had maintained his presence in the community despite his physical absence filled Marcus with unexpected emotion. In his drive to escape his past and build his future, he'd never considered what it meant to those left behind. As the congregation settled, Marcus noticed something odd. Several elderly congregants exchanged subtle hand gestures with his mother. Movements that appeared casual, but which Marcus recognized from military communications training. Pastor Jenkins, a distinguished man in his 60s, included phrases in his sermon that seemed oddly specific, mentioning preparation, watchfulness, and the appointed hour, while making eye contact with Eleanor. When the service ended, Eleanor guided Marcus toward the reception hall, where she introduced him to a young woman he recognized immediately. "This is Zoe Taylor," Eleanor said. "She teaches computer science at my old school." Zoe smiled warmly, though her eyes held a careful assessment. "Your mother speaks highly of you, Mr. Washington." "Please, it's Marcus," he replied, studying her. If his mother's warning was accurate, there was more to this young teacher than appeared on the surface. "Zoe has continued my legacy at Westside," Eleanor explained. "She started a coding program for neighborhood kids, working miracles with outdated equipment and no budget. The students deserve every opportunity," Zoe replied, "just as Ms. Washington's students did." They shared lunch together in the church basement, where Marcus learned more about Zoe's program. She spoke passionately about expanding access to technology for underprivileged students, describing challenges that resonated with Marcus's own childhood experiences. When Eleanor excused herself to greet other church members, Zoe's demeanor changed subtly. "Your mother didn't tell you everything about what happened at the dealership," she said, her voice low and urgent. "They didn't just discriminate against her, they recognized her. The security guards used a code phrase, Washington situation containment. This wasn't about her trying to buy a car. It was about who she is." "And who is she exactly?" Marcus asked carefully. "I'm not entirely sure," Zoe admitted. "But I know she's been investigating Kensington for years. My grandmother encountered similar treatment at that dealership 5 years ago, except in her case it really was discrimination." Eleanor approached her afterward, asked very specific questions about what she saw inside. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your mother is in danger," Zoe said simply, "and because I think you might be in a position to help her in ways I can't." When Eleanor returned, Marcus announced he was extending his stay in Atlanta indefinitely. The surprise on her face couldn't hide the relief underneath. Over the next 2 days, Marcus accompanied his mother through her daily routines, grocery shopping, volunteer work at the senior center, and medical appointments. He was shocked to discover her arthritis had worsened significantly due to walking in all-weather conditions since losing her car. "A reliable vehicle would make a substantial difference in your quality of life," her doctor commented during her appointment. "The stress of public transportation in your condition is exacerbating the inflammation." Marcus also visited Westside High School, where Eleanor had taught for 30 years. The principal, Dr. Williams, spoke of Eleanor with profound respect. "Your mother's teaching methods were revolutionary," he explained, showing Marcus a display case of student achievements. "She produced more STEM scholarship recipients than any other teacher in the district's history. Many of her students now work for NASA, major tech companies, and yes, even some for you, though you might not know it." In Eleanor's former classroom, now, Zoe's, a wall of achievers, still featured Marcus's science fair photo from 1998. when he'd created an early algorithm that would eventually form the foundation of his company's core technology. That evening, looking through old photo albums with his mother, Marcus discovered news clippings about Richard Kensington tucked between family photos. "You knew him before the dealership?" Marcus asked, noting the dates on the articles. "I knew his son, Michael," Eleanor explained. "A brilliant boy with severe dyslexia. Other teachers had written him off as lazy or unintelligent. I developed specialized teaching methods for him when he was in my class." "And Kensington?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "Richard Kensington presents himself as a self-made businessman and philanthropist. In reality, his wealth comes from selling military technology to whoever pays highest. Technology developed using research stolen from scientists like your father." The mention of his father hung in the air between them. "Is he alive?" Marcus finally asked the question that had haunted him for decades. Eleanor's fingers traced the jade pendant at her neck. "I don't know for certain, but I've followed every lead, every rumor for 30 years, and I believe, yes, I believe he is." Later that night, in his hotel room, Marcus made a secure call to his executive team. "I need everything you can find on Prestige Motors and its owner, Richard Kensington," he instructed. "Financial records, court cases, property holdings, political connections, and I need it by tomorrow morning." As he ended the call, Marcus stared at the city lights beyond his window. In just 3 days, his understanding of his mother, and possibly his father, had been completely upended. The straightforward discrimination case he'd initially imagined had revealed layers of espionage, corruption, and danger that stretched back decades. Whatever was happening centered around his mother's jade pendant and Project Emerald. And Marcus was now certain of one thing. The retired teacher who had raised him harbored secrets that could shake foundations far beyond an Atlanta car dealership. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows as Marcus sat beside Eleanor in the same church where he'd attended services as a child. Redemption Baptist Church looked unchanged. The worn wooden pews, the faded hymnal books, the same elderly deacon nodding off in the corner. But after yesterday's revelations about his mother's secret identity as the principal, Marcus now viewed everything through a different lens. He watched as Pastor Jenkins delivered his sermon, noting how certain phrases seemed directed specifically at his mother. When the pastor mentioned keeping watch against those who would harm the innocent, his eyes locked with Eleanor's momentarily. "Be prepared, for the hour approaches when truth must prevail over deception," Pastor Jenkins continued. "When the light must shine upon dark dealings." Marcus leaned closer to his mother. "Is the entire sermon coded?" he whispered. Eleanor's lips curved slightly. "Only parts. Nathan has a flair for the dramatic." After the service ended, congregation members approached to greet them. Marcus noted how differently he now interpreted their interactions. What had seemed like ordinary church small talk yesterday now appeared methodical and purposeful. An elderly woman named Ruth Adams clasped Eleanor's hands in greeting, her arthritic fingers tapping a distinct pattern against Eleanor's palm. A retired postal worker named William Thompson commented on the weather, while subtly glancing toward the church office. A silver-haired man with a veteran's pin on his lapel made a seemingly casual comment about Tuesday's meeting while touching his right cufflink. Eleanor introduced Marcus to several church friends, all elderly people who appeared harmless at first glance. Then Marcus noticed the details: calluses on their hands consistent with regular firearm usage, the precise way they positioned themselves in the room to maintain sight lines to all entrances, the veteran's pin that Marcus recognized as belonging to a highly classified military unit rather than any standard service branch. One man, introduced as Franklin Bennett, a retired high school principal, had a tattoo partially visible beneath his sleeve, the same jade emblem from the Project Emerald. "Documents. Your mother speaks highly of your technological innovations," Franklin said, his eyes assessing Marcus with military precision despite his friendly smile. "Perhaps you could join us for coffee in the fellowship hall?" Eleanor led Marcus not toward the main fellowship hall but down a corridor to a storage area marked "Building Maintenance Only." She glanced around before placing her hand on what appeared to be an outdated thermostat, A fingerprint scanner hidden within the device glowed briefly before a soft click indicated an unlocked door. "What you're about to see requires absolute discretion," Eleanor warned, her voice taking on an authority Marcus had never heard from her before. They descended a narrow staircase to a lower level that did not appear on any church blueprints. At the bottom, another security door required both Eleanor's fingerprint and a code entered on a keypad disguised as a light switch. The door opened to reveal what could only be described as a command center. Multiple workstations with advanced computers lined the walls. Large monitors displayed surveillance feeds from across Atlanta. A central table held maps marked with locations and timestamps. Men and women, all appearing to be seniors, worked at various stations with the efficiency of seasoned intelligence professionals. "Welcome to the Teacher's Lounge," Eleanor said, a hint of pride in her voice. "What is this place?" Marcus asked, stunned by the sophistication of the hidden facility. "The nerve center of our operation," Franklin explained, stepping forward. "We call ourselves the Resistance Teachers. Most of us are actually retired educators, but we've all had additional training. We discovered decades ago that powerful individuals were using educational foundations as covers for weapons trafficking and money laundering," Eleanor continued. "When traditional channels failed to address the corruption, we formed our own network." "You're vigilantes?" Marcus asked incredulously. "We prefer concerned citizens with specialized skills," Ruth Adams interjected, looking up from a surveillance monitor. Despite her grandmotherly appearance, she handled the advanced technology with expert precision. "Your mother is our strategist, our principal," Franklin added. "She identifies patterns others miss, coordinates our information gathering, and determines our targets." As Marcus tried to process this revelation, the security door opened again. Zoe Taylor entered, carrying a laptop and several flash drives. "Sorry I'm late," she said, nodding to Eleanor before acknowledging Marcus with evident surprise. "I see you've been initiated." "Ms. Taylor isn't just a teacher," Eleanor explained. "She was an intelligence analyst before joining our network. Her position at the school gives her access to families affected by Kensington's operations. You should know I wasn't entirely forthcoming yesterday," Zoe admitted to Marcus. "I'm not just concerned about your mother as a community member. I was placed at Westside High by a government agency investigating the same corruption networks your mother has tracked for decades." "Which agency?" Marcus asked, his military training making him instinctively cautious. "That's complicated," Zoe replied, exchanging a glance with Eleanor. "Let's just say there are elements within the government that recognize the problem, but can't address it through official channels due to political entanglements." Eleanor gestured for everyone to gather around the central table. "Marcus, what you need to understand is that my teaching career wasn't a cover. It was the foundation of everything. As educators, we had unique access to community information. We saw the effects of corruption firsthand, children whose parents disappeared after asking questions about strange shipments at the docks, families intimidated after witnessing unusual activities at supposedly abandoned warehouses. We built our network classroom by classroom, school by school," Franklin added. "Teachers are trained observers. We notice patterns, changes in behavior, inconsistencies, skills that translate remarkably well to intelligence gathering. But there's more to your involvement than professional concern," Marcus said to his mother, pieces falling into place. "This is personal for you," Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Yes, it's time you knew the full truth." She took a deep breath. "I wasn't always a teacher, Marcus. I was recruited for intelligence work during the Cold War, specifically for psychological operations and pattern recognition." She touched the jade pendant at her neck. "That's where I met your father, James. He was a CIA technical specialist, developing communication systems. We were assigned to the original Project Emerald, a counterintelligence operation targeting weapons technology theft. When I became pregnant with you, I left active service." James continued his work. "Deeper. Cover with each passing year. When you were 7, he supposedly died in a car accident." Eleanor's voice remained steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "I never believed it. The circumstances were too convenient, too clean. 3 years later, while teaching, I discovered weapons technology was being funneled through educational grants to my school, the same technology your father had been tracking. That's when I realized he wasn't tracking the weapons. He had become a target because of what he knew. Marcus struggled to reconcile this new history with the childhood he remembered. So all those years, when I thought you were just a dedicated teacher working late? Sometimes I was grading papers, Eleanor said with a small smile. Sometimes I was tracking international arms dealers. A mother contains multitudes. Franklin cleared his throat. We should show him the Kensington files. Eleanor nodded, and Zoe pulled up documents on the main screen. Richard Kensington recognized your mother at the dealership because he was involved in the operation that allegedly killed your father 30 years ago. The screen displayed surveillance photos, financial records, and travel documentation that painted a picture of Kensington's dual life, respected businessman by day, weapons broker by night. We believe Kensington might lead us to proof your father is still alive, Eleanor continued. There have been sightings, communications intercepted, fragments that suggest James Washington didn't die in that car crash. Before Marcus could respond, an alarm sounded from one of the monitoring stations. William Thompson called out, "Security breach at Eleanor's apartment, professional team, military precision." The main screen switched to surveillance footage showing black-clad figures methodically searching Eleanor's home. Marcus leaned forward, studying their movements and equipment. "That's rapid force gear," he said, recognizing the specialized equipment. "Private military contractors, high-end." He zoomed in on one figure, enhancing the image to reveal a partial face beneath a tactical mask. "I know him. Thomas Reed, former teammate from my military unit." The implications sent a chill through the room. If former special operations personnel were searching Eleanor's apartment, this went far beyond a corrupt car dealership owner. "They're looking for something specific," Eleanor observed, watching the methodical search pattern. "The pendant, most likely. They don't know I always wear it." "What exactly is that pendant?" Marcus asked. "It's connected to Project Emerald, isn't it?" Eleanor hesitated before responding. "It's more than jewelry, more than a memento. But this isn't the place to discuss it." She turned to the group. "We need to accelerate our timeline. The charity gala is our best opportunity, perhaps our only one." "What charity gala?" Marcus asked. "Kensington hosts an annual fundraiser for his education foundation," Zoe explained. "It's in 3 days. We've been working for months to secure access, but with your resources, we could do more than observe," Eleanor finished. "We could finally get what we need." Marcus noted the intensity in his mother's expression, a determination he'd never associated with the woman who had raised him. "You've waited decades for this opportunity." Eleanor nodded, then hesitated before removing a folded paper from her pocket and placing it on the table. "There's something else you should know. Why I'm pushing forward now, despite the increased risks." Marcus unfolded the document, medical test results with his mother's name at the top. The diagnosis hit him like a physical blow. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Terminal. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely audible. 6 months. Perhaps less. Eleanor's voice remained steady. "I've kept it from the others. Only Franklin knows." "That's why you finally reached out to me after 8 years, Marcus realized. "Not just because of what you discovered about Project Emerald." "I needed to warn you," Eleanor admitted. "And yes, I wanted to see you before." She straightened her shoulders, pushing aside vulnerability. "But this isn't about a deathbed reconciliation, Marcus. It's about finishing what your father and I started. It's about justice and protection." "Protection? For whom?" "For you," she said simply. "Because once I'm gone, they'll come for you next." Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Marcus's hotel penthouse as he established his command center. He'd checked out of the St. Regis as Eleanor had advised and moved to a boutique hotel under a false name, converting the suite into an operations hub for what he now understood was a mission with life or death stakes. WashTech's advanced AI systems had been analyzing the data from Eleanor's network throughout the night. Multiple screens displayed connections between Prestige Motors and shell companies used for international weapons shipments. Financial transactions traced dark money flowing through educational charities into offshore accounts. Surveillance photos documented meetings between Kensington and known arms dealers. The pattern is clear, Marcus muttered, studying the web of connections. But why use a car dealership as a front? His secure phone rang. Diana Chen, a former military teammate now working for a competing intelligence agency. He'd reached out to her reluctantly, knowing it would create a paper trail, but needing her specialized knowledge. "Tell me you didn't really retire to sell sports cars," Diana said without preamble when he answered. "Good to hear your voice too," Marcus replied dryly. "What did you find? Your mother's jade pendant? It's not just a pretty rock. It's linked to Project Emerald, which wasn't just a standard military operation. It was a deep cover network designed to track weapons developed with stolen technology." She paused. "Technology that looks remarkably similar to patents now held by WashTech Solutions." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your meteoric rise in the tech world might not be entirely due to your admittedly impressive brain," Diana replied. "The pattern recognition algorithms that form the core of your AI systems? They bear striking similarities to classified projects your father worked on before his alleged death." "That's impossible," Marcus argued. "I developed those systems from scratch during my MIT days. Did you? Or were you guided toward certain solutions? Specific approaches? Did certain doors open a little too easily? Funding appear at precisely the right moments?" Marcus thought back to his early career. The unexpected scholarship to MIT, despite dropping out of undergraduate studies. The venture capital that materialized when his first company faced bankruptcy. The government contracts that came through just when he needed them. "Someone manipulated my entire career path," he realized aloud. "But why?" "Your father's work was revolutionary but incomplete," Diana explained. "Perhaps they needed you to finish what he started. Needed your mind specifically because you're his son, with the same intuitive understanding of the underlying principles." "Who is they?" "That's the trillion-dollar question," Diana replied. "And why I'm breaking about 15 regulations to have this conversation. Be careful, Marcus. You're playing a game where you don't even know all the pieces on the board, let alone who's moving them." After ending the call, Marcus arranged an undercover visit to Prestige Motors' restricted warehouse facility. Using credentials provided by Eleanor's network, he gained access to the service area behind the main showroom. What he found confirmed their suspicions and revealed an operation far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. Luxury vehicles were being modified with hidden compartments designed to transport weapons components. Not complete weapons, but specialized parts that would avoid detection by standard security scans. They're shipping the components separately, Marcus realized, photographing the modifications with a camera disguised as a maintenance tool. Each car contains a different piece of the puzzle. Together, they create weapon systems that don't officially exist. Later that afternoon, Marcus confronted Zoe about her true allegiance after discovering encrypted communications between her and a government handler on frequencies only used by specific intelligence branches. "It's not what you think," Zoe insisted when Marcus presented his evidence. "Yes, I was sent to monitor your mother, not help her, but that changed when I discovered the truth." "What truth?" "My grandmother wasn't just a random victim of discrimination at Kensington's dealership," Zoe explained. "She worked as an administrative assistant at a defense contractor connected to Project Emerald. When she noticed accounting discrepancies, she became a threat." Zoe's eyes hardened with remembered pain. "The car accident that killed her matches the same pattern as dozens of other accidents involving people who asked the wrong questions about Kensington's operations. I was recruited specifically because of my family connection. They thought I'd be motivated by revenge to help them monitor your mother. They didn't expect me to discover that Eleanor's network was more effective than my official handlers. So now you're a double agent," Marcus concluded. "Triple, technically," Zoe said with a grim smile. "My official handlers think I'm monitoring Eleanor. Eleanor knows I report to government contacts but believes I'm loyal to her mission. The truth is, I'm loyal to justice, wherever that leads." That evening, Marcus accompanied Eleanor to what she described as a cancer treatment at a private medical facility. Instead, they met in a secluded room with a man Eleanor introduced only as the informant, a nervous thin man who worked in Kensington's accounting department. "The shipment is scheduled for the day after the gala," he explained, sliding a flash drive across the table. 17 vehicles, all certified as diplomatic donations to embassies across Southeast Asia. "The documentation looks perfect. The State Department signed off on everything." "What are they shipping?" Marcus asked. "Components for autonomous weapon systems, drones that select and engage targets without human approval. The systems are officially banned by international treaty, but there's a black market for governments looking to build deniable capabilities." They left the meeting. Eleanor stumbled, nearly collapsing before Marcus caught her. "It's not just a cover story, is it?" he asked quietly, helping her to the car. "You're actually ill." Eleanor nodded reluctantly. "Not cancer. That was a convenient explanation. It's neural degeneration from experimental treatments during the early days of my intelligence work. Treatments designed to enhance pattern recognition. They worked, but the long-term effects are problematic." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you focused on the mission, not worried about your dying mother," Eleanor replied with characteristic directness. "And because I've always hated appearing weak." Back at the command center, Marcus used his corporate access to trace financial transactions that revealed the true extent of Kensington's protection. Several politicians scheduled to attend the charity gala appeared in the transaction records: campaign contributions, real estate deals, consulting contracts for family members. "This explains why previous attempts to expose him failed," Marcus told Eleanor when she arrived. "He's bought protection at every level." "Not every level," Eleanor corrected. "Just enough to create obstacles. No system is impenetrable, Marcus. You just need to find the right pressure point." As Eleanor reviewed the financial data, Marcus discovered a hidden folder in her secured files. Surveillance photos that appeared recent despite their aged quality. The subject was a silver-haired man whose features, despite the decades that had passed, were hauntingly familiar. "You think he's alive?" Marcus said, not a question but a statement of dawning understanding. "My father. These photos were taken 6 months ago in Singapore," Eleanor confirmed. "The facial recognition match is 87% certain, accounting for age progression. If he's alive, where has he been all these years? Why didn't he contact us?" Eleanor's expression grew troubled. "That's what I've been trying to determine. The most likely explanation is that he's deep cover within Kensington's organization. If that's true, then exposing Kensington publicly could endanger him," Marcus finished, the implications hitting home. "Our entire plan would put him at risk." "Yes, which is why we need more than just evidence of Kensington's crimes. We need to understand the full picture before we act." Eleanor turned to face her son directly. "That's why you're going to infiltrate Prestige Motors tomorrow, not just to gather evidence but to get close enough to Kensington to determine if your father is part of his operation." "And if he is?" "Then we adapt," Eleanor said simply. "We've waited 30 years for answers. We can wait a little longer to ensure we don't destroy what we're trying to save." The next morning, Marcus prepared for his undercover operation. Unlike his previous casual visit, this time he would present himself as what he truly was: a billionaire tech entrepreneur looking for luxury vehicles. The goal: to attract Kensington's personal attention and begin the game of cat and mouse that might lead to his father. As he adjusted his custom-tailored suit and checked the specialized equipment disguised as ordinary accessories, Marcus reflected on how completely his understanding of his life had shifted in less than a week. His estranged mother was a covert intelligence operative, battling a terminal condition. His presumed dead father might be alive and working undercover within a weapons trafficking network, and his own technological empire might have been built on foundations laid by unseen hands, guiding him toward completing his father's work. The realization was both disturbing and clarifying. For years, Marcus had defined himself in opposition to his mother, rejecting her modest educator's life for the high-stakes world of cutting-edge technology and billion-dollar deals. Now he understood that they had been engaged in the same fundamental work all along, just from different angles. "The car is ready, sir," his driver announced, interrupting his thoughts. Marcus nodded, mentally shifting into the operational mindset he'd learned during his military years. "Let's go shopping for some very expensive cars," he said with a tight smile, "and see what secrets we can drive home." Marcus Washington stepped out of his chauffeur-driven Bentley onto the gleaming pavement of Prestige Motors, a man transformed from the cautious son who had visited his mother days earlier. Today, he wore power like a second skin. His bespoke, charcoal suit, handmade Italian shoes, and subtle platinum accessories broadcasting wealth and influence before he spoke a single word. The glass doors of the dealership opened automatically as he approached. Inside, the showroom hummed with the quiet energy of luxury commerce, the soft lighting designed to make the vehicles gleam like jewels, the hushed conversations between salespeople and prospective buyers, the delicate clink of espresso cups from the customer lounge. Marcus paused, deliberately making himself visible while scanning the space. In his peripheral vision, he spotted a member of Eleanor's network, an elderly man disguised as a janitor, making his way toward the service department. Their timing was perfectly synchronized. A receptionist approached with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Prestige Motors, sir. How may we assist you today?" "I'm interested in expanding my collection," Marcus replied, his tone casual but carrying the unmistakable confidence of someone accustomed to being accommodated. "Perhaps something limited edition." Her smile widened as she recognized an opportunity. "Of course. Let me find our senior sales consultant for you." While waiting, Marcus allowed his gaze to wander across the showroom, mentally mapping security camera positions, staff movements, and access points. His military training had taught him to absorb such details automatically, cataloging potential threats and escape routes. "Mr. Washington!" The voice carried genuine surprise and excitement. Marcus turned to find Bradley Wilson approaching, his demeanor completely transformed from the dismissive attitude he'd shown Eleanor days earlier. Recognition was evident in the salesman's eyes, not of Marcus as Eleanor's son, but of Marcus Washington, tech billionaire and founder of WashTech Solutions. "I thought it was you," Bradley continued, extending his hand with an eager smile. "I follow your company's innovations closely. It's an honor to meet you." Marcus allowed a subtle pause before accepting the handshake, establishing dominance through the smallest of social cues. "You have the advantage of me, Mr. Wilson." Bradley Wilson, senior sales consultant. The promotion was almost certainly a lie, but Marcus noted it without comment. "What brings you to Prestige Motors today?" "I'm looking to upgrade my fleet," Marcus explained, allowing Bradley to guide him toward the showroom's most expensive section. "Both for personal use and corporate entertainment. I'm hosting international investors next month and want to make the right impression." Bradley launched into an enthusiastic presentation, describing engine specifications and luxury features with newfound attentiveness. As they walked, Marcus deliberately kept the conversation on the vehicles while observing Bradley's mannerisms. The salesman's body language revealed military training similar to his own. The balanced stance, the calculated hand movements, the constant environmental awareness. "This particular model includes our premium security package," Bradley was saying, indicating a sleek black sedan. "Bulletproof glass, reinforced panels, and communication systems that remain functional even in signal jamming environments. Unusual features for civilian transportation," Marcus observed casually. "Some of our clients have unique security concerns," Bradley replied with a knowing smile. After examining several vehicles, Marcus deliberately left his custom smartphone on the hood of a car while Bradley retrieved specification documents. As expected, the salesperson quickly examined the device when he thought Marcus wasn't looking. The phone's lock screen displayed a Bloomberg News headline: "WashTech's Marcus Washington finalizes $4.8 billion defense contract amid controversy over autonomous systems." When Marcus returned, Bradley's demeanor had shifted subtly, more deferential, but also more calculating. He was no longer merely a salesperson serving a wealthy client, but someone recognizing a potentially valuable connection. "Mr. Washington, perhaps you'd be interested in some of our more specialized options," Bradley suggested, lowering his voice. "We offer customization services for clients with particular requirements." "What kind of requirements?" Marcus asked, feigning innocent interest. "Enhanced storage capacity, modified navigation systems, diplomatic clearance packages." Bradley's eyes conveyed more meaning than his words. "Features that facilitate international operations without unnecessary complications." "Sounds intriguing," Marcus replied, "though I'd want to speak with someone who could provide specific details about these customizations." "Of course. Let me see if our sales manager is available," Bradley said, already reaching for his phone. Within minutes, Vanessa Mitchell appeared, her professional smile masking the same recognition Bradley had shown. "Mr. Washington, what an unexpected pleasure. I'm Vanessa Mitchell, sales director at Prestige Motors." "Ms. Mitchell," Marcus acknowledged. "Bradley was just telling me about your specialized customization services." "Yes, we pride ourselves on meeting unique client needs," she replied smoothly. "Perhaps you'd like to continue this conversation in our executive lounge? More private, as..." They walked toward the back of the showroom. Vanessa signaled to security personnel with a subtle hand gesture that Marcus immediately recognized as a command to increase surveillance. Their suspicion was expected. A billionaire tech CEO with defense contracts suddenly appearing in person was too convenient to be coincidental. The executive lounge was elegantly appointed with leather seating, a fully stocked bar, and conspicuously, few electronic devices. A signal blocking system hummed almost imperceptibly, detectable only to someone specifically trained to recognize it. "Can I offer you something to drink, Mr. Washington?" Vanessa asked. "Sparkling water." "Thank you," Marcus replied, maintaining his focus. The game was delicate now, showing enough interest to appear genuine while gathering intelligence without revealing his true purpose. "Bradley mentioned you're hosting international investors," Vanessa continued as she served his drink. "Which markets are you exploring?" "Southeast Asia primarily," Marcus answered, echoing information from the informant about Kensington's upcoming shipment. "Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, rapidly growing tech sectors with fewer regulatory hurdles than Europe." Vanessa's expression revealed nothing, but her eyes showed heightened interest. "Coincidentally, Mr. Kensington, our owner, has extensive connections in those markets. He's developed quite the expertise in navigating regional complexities." "Has he?" Marcus affected casual interest. "Perhaps I should speak with him directly. In my experience, the right introductions can be more valuable than any financial investment." Vanessa hesitated, assessing. "Mr. Kensington is quite selective about his meetings. However, given your position at WashTech and your focus on autonomous systems," she left the implication hanging delicately in the air between them. "I understand discretion," Marcus assured her, leaning forward slightly. "Some of our more advanced technologies face challenging regulatory environments. We're always interested in partners who understand the need for creative solutions." The bait was set. Marcus watched Vanessa process his statement. A tech billionaire, potentially willing to circumvent regulations, was exactly the type of contact Kensington would value. "Let me see if Mr. Kensington is available," she said finally, stepping outside to make a call. Alone in the lounge, Marcus activated a device disguised as a cufflink, scanning for surveillance equipment. The room contained 3 hidden cameras and 2 microphones, professional-grade equipment far beyond what a typical car dealership would install. When Vanessa returned, her demeanor had shifted subtly toward deference. "Mr. Kensington would be delighted to meet you. He's just finishing a call." Minutes later, Richard Kensington himself entered the room. In person, he was more imposing than his photographs suggested. Tall, powerfully built despite his age, with steel gray hair and penetrating blue eyes that assessed Marcus with unsettling thoroughness. "Marcus Washington," Kensington said, extending his hand. "Your reputation precedes you. Your work on quantum encryption has particularly caught my attention." The specific reference to Marcus's most classified work, technology not publicly associated with WashTech, confirmed Eleanor's suspicions about Kensington's high-level intelligence sources. "Mr. Kensington," Marcus replied, shaking his hand firmly. I'm surprised a car dealer would follow quantum encryption developments. Kensington smiled, revealing perfect teeth. I have diverse interests beyond automotive retail. Please call me Richard. As they settled into their seats, Marcus noted how Kensington positioned himself, back to the wall, clear view of the door, right hand unencumbered. The movements of a man who had spent decades in dangerous circles, not boardrooms. Vanessa mentioned you're preparing for meetings in Southeast Asia, Kensington began conversationally. Challenging markets for technology companies, particularly those developing systems with dual-use potential. The term dual-use, the official designation for technologies with both civilian and military applications, was another calculated reference to Marcus's classified work. Regulatory obstacles create inefficiencies, Marcus replied carefully. My investors expect returns, not bureaucratic delays. Indeed, Kensington agreed. I've found that the right introductions can help navigate such obstacles. I host a charity gala for my education foundation every year, happening tomorrow evening as it happens. Many influential individuals attend, including several with interests aligned with your Southeast Asian expansion. Sounds like an event worth attending, Marcus commented. Consider yourself invited, Kensington said smoothly. And feel free to bring a guest. Sometimes a fresh perspective can be illuminating. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, a sophisticated dance of implied offers and subtle probing. Kensington demonstrated unexpected knowledge about WashTech's government contracts and technical capabilities, testing Marcus's reactions with carefully phrased questions about private security applications and extrajudicial deployment scenarios. Marcus played his role perfectly, presenting himself as a brilliant innovator frustrated by government restrictions, a man potentially open to less regulated markets for his technology. Kensington took the bait, providing increasingly specific details about his consulting services for companies facing similar challenges. As their meeting concluded, Kensington personally walked Marcus to his car. I look forward to continuing our conversation tomorrow evening, he said. My associate will send the details to your office. Marcus nodded. I appreciate the invitation. These connections could prove valuable for all involved. One last thing, Kensington added, his tone casual but eyes sharp. You mentioned an interest in our vehicles with enhanced security features. May I ask what prompted that specific interest? The question was a test, one Marcus had anticipated. Recent developments in San Francisco, he replied smoothly. One of my lead engineers was targeted in what appeared to be a corporate espionage attempt. I prefer to take preventative measures. Kensington studied him for a moment before nodding, apparently satisfied. Wise approach. We'll have some suitable options prepared for your review after the gala. As Marcus's car pulled away from the dealership, he maintained his composed expression until they were several blocks away. Only then did he allow himself to breathe deeply, releasing the tension of the high-stakes performance. His driver, actually a security specialist from Eleanor's network, spoke without turning around. You got his attention. Yes, Marcus agreed. And his suspicion. He'll be running extensive background checks before tomorrow night. Our countermeasures are in place, the driver assured him. Any investigation will confirm exactly what we want them to see. Marcus's phone vibrated with an encrypted alert. Their operation had been compromised. Surveillance photos showed Eleanor being followed by an unmarked vehicle after leaving her supposed medical treatment. Change of plans, Marcus directed. Take me to Checkpoint Delta immediately. Checkpoint Delta, a safe house on the outskirts of Atlanta, was empty when Marcus arrived. Signs of a hasty departure were evident. A half-empty coffee cup still warm on the table, a computer screen still glowing. Following protocol, Marcus accessed the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, retrieving a secure satellite phone. Eleanor's voice answered on the first ring. Our cover is blown, she said without preamble. The pastor has been compromised. Where are you? Secondary location with Franklin. Zoe was supposed to meet us but never arrived. A cold knot formed in Marcus's stomach. I'm going to find her. Marcus, it could be a trap. He ended the call, already moving toward the door. Using tracking software on his secure phone, he followed Zoe's last known coordinates to an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. The building appeared deserted, but Marcus's military training detected subtle signs of recent activity. Tire marks in the dust, a security camera disabled rather than defunct, a door latch that had been recently forced and repaired. Moving silently, through the shadows, Marcus identified potential ambush points and mapped exit routes. The warehouse's main floor was empty, except for abandoned equipment, but a faint sound drew his attention to a side office. Inside, he found not Eleanor but Zoe Taylor, bound to a chair with professional restraints, her face bruised but her eyes alert. When she saw Marcus, her expression shifted from relief to panic. "It's a trap," she warned, her voice hoarse. "The pastor is working for them." Before Marcus could respond, an explosion of sound and light disoriented him. A flash-bang grenade, deployed from a hidden compartment. Training took over as he dropped to the floor, drawing the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. 3 attackers converged on his position, their movements revealing special forces training. Marcus disabled the first with a precision shot to the leg, evaded the second with a tactical roll, but the third managed to pin him momentarily before Marcus broke free using a counter technique from his military days. The brief combat ended, with Marcus using technology in his watch to temporarily disable the attacker's communications and night vision equipment, creating the disorientation he needed to free Zoe and escape. "Who sent them?" Marcus demanded as they reached his vehicle. "Kensington has a security division separate from his regular operation," Zoe explained, wincing as she settled into the passenger seat. "They made me when I was establishing surveillance. Points for tomorrow's gala." "How did they connect you to Eleanor?" "They didn't," Zoe said grimly. "They connected me to you. Someone has been monitoring your movements since you arrived in Atlanta." As they drove through back roads to avoid pursuit, Zoe revealed critical information. "Your mother's jade pendant. It's not just jewelry. It's a key to something Kensington has been searching for since your father disappeared." "A key to what?" "Secure server containing the complete Project Emerald archives," Zoe explained. "Your father built it as insurance before he disappeared. Documentation of every illegal weapons transaction, every compromised official, every covert operation Kensington was involved with. The pendant contains a physical authentication key that can't be duplicated or hacked." The revelation clarified everything. Why Eleanor had been targeted, why Kensington had reacted so strongly to her presence at the dealership, why her apartment had been searched so thoroughly. "Eleanor has been wearing the key around her neck for 30 years, Marcus realized, hiding it in plain sight. "Yes, but the pendant alone isn't enough," Zoe continued. "It requires biometric confirmation from a Washington family member plus the physical key. That's why they need both you and Eleanor, or the pendant at minimum." Marcus processed this information as he drove toward the secondary safe house where Eleanor was waiting. The stakes had elevated beyond exposing a corrupt businessman. They were now racing to access information that could reshape international security landscapes. "Tomorrow's gala is still our best opportunity," he decided. "But we need to adjust the plan." The night of Kensington's charity gala arrived with unseasonable warmth, the Atlanta skyline glittering against a clear evening sky. Kensington's estate, a sprawling Georgian mansion set on 20 acres of manicured grounds, blazed with light as limousines and luxury cars delivered guests to the red-carpeted entrance. Security was military-grade, with facial recognition scanners, discreetly integrated into decorative elements and weapons detection systems hidden beneath floral arrangements. Armed guards in tuxedos maintained a perimeter that appeared ceremonial, but functioned with tactical precision. Marcus arrived in spectacular fashion, his Rolls-Royce accompanied by 2 identical vehicles, decoys to confuse surveillance. His entrance was calculated to draw attention, establishing him as a man who valued both luxury and security. Wearing an impeccably tailored tuxedo and carrying himself with the confident air of a man accustomed to power, Marcus handed his invitation to the security team. The advanced countermeasures Eleanor's network had established ensured his background check revealed exactly what Kensington expected to see: a brilliant, ambitious tech innovator with flexible ethical boundaries when it came to profit. "Mr. Washington," a staff member greeted him after security clearance. Mr. Kensington asked to be notified of your arrival. He'll meet you shortly. Meanwhile, please enjoy the reception. The grand ballroom had been transformed into a showcase of tasteful opulence. Crystal chandeliers, rare orchids imported from Southeast Asia, and priceless artwork temporarily installed for the evening. Waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Marcus moved through the space with practiced ease, accepting a champagne flute and engaging in casual conversation with other guests while carefully noting the positions of Kensington's security personnel. Through a nearly invisible earpiece, he maintained contact with Eleanor's network, which had operatives positioned throughout the venue in various disguises. Eleanor is in position. Franklin's voice informed him discreetly. Waiting for your signal. Understood, Marcus murmured, his response concealed by raising his champagne glass to his lips. Kensington appeared at Marcus's side with the fluid movement of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. Mr. Washington, I'm delighted you could join us, he said, clasping Marcus's hand firmly. Come, there are several people you should meet. Over the next hour, Kensington introduced Marcus to various influential figures, politicians with oversight of defense contracts, regulators responsible for technology export approvals, and business people with suspicious connections to regions known for weapons proliferation. During these introductions, Marcus planted microscopic tracking and listening devices on key targets, the technology disguised as lint or dandruff that transferred during handshakes or casual contact. Your guest hasn't arrived? Kensington inquired eventually, his tone casual, but eyes watchful. She'll be joining us shortly, Marcus replied. She had a prior commitment. As they continued their circuit of the room, Marcus detected subtle signals. Among the security staff, hand movements and positioning shifts that suggested military coordination. One silver-haired security officer near the eastern exit used a distinctive finger tap pattern that Marcus recognized from his classified training, a communication method taught only to a specific Black Ops unit. The realization sent adrenaline coursing through him. Could his father really be here, hidden in plain sight as part of Kensington's security team? Before he could investigate further, a disturbance rippled through the crowd near the main entrance. Guests turned, conversations paused, and security personnel tensed as a new arrival commanded attention. Eleanor Washington entered the ballroom, transformed from the modest teacher Marcus had reconnected with days ago. She wore an elegant evening gown in deep emerald that complemented her silver hair, styled in a sophisticated updo that emphasized her regal bearing. The jade pendant hung prominently at her throat, its green surface catching the light with each dignified step she took. Kensington froze mid-sentence when he spotted her, recognition and shock flashing across his face before his practiced composure returned. The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly, with Eleanor's unexpected appearance creating a focal point that disrupted Kensington's careful control. Who is that woman? One guest whispered loudly enough for Marcus to hear. She carries herself like royalty. Marcus excused himself from Kensington's side, moving across the room to greet his mother as planned. You look stunning, he said sincerely, taking her hand and kissing her cheek. Thank you for the invitation, darling, Eleanor replied, her voice carrying just enough to be overheard by nearby guests. I hope I'm not too fashionably late. Marcus guided her through the crowd, aware of the calculated risk they were taking. Kensington would never believe this meeting was coincidental, but their plan depended on forcing him to react without creating a public scene. Richard Kensington, Marcus said as they approached the host. Allow me to introduce my mother, Eleanor Washington. Kensington's face betrayed nothing as he took Eleanor's extended hand, but Marcus noticed the slight tremor in his fingers as they brushed against the jade pendant. Mrs. Washington, Kensington said, his voice controlled. What an unexpected pleasure. Is it unexpected, Richard? Eleanor asked, her tone pleasant but eyes unflinching. I thought perhaps you recognized me at your dealership last week. The three of them stood in a triangle of tension, outwardly maintaining the appearance of polite social interaction while engaging in a dangerous exchange of subtle threats and counter-threats. I meet so many people in business, Kensington deflected smoothly. though I'm certain I would remember someone as distinguished as yourself. How is Michael these days? Eleanor asked, maintaining her pleasant smile. I often think of him and how proud I was of his progress in overcoming his learning challenges. The reference to his son, and the implied reminder of Eleanor's connection to his family, caused a momentary crack in Kensington's facade. He's well, an architect in Boston, now. Wonderful. Children are our most precious legacy, aren't they? Eleanor's hand moved to touch her pendant. The gifts we pass to the next generation shape the future in ways we cannot always predict. Kensington's eyes narrowed slightly at the deliberate gesture. Indeed. Though sometimes what we intend as gifts can become burdens if mishandled, the conversation continued in this vein, each statement carrying double meanings recognized only by the three participants while other guests circulated around them, oblivious to the life and death stakes beneath the social pleasantries. I understand your foundation does remarkable work in education, Eleanor commented. Project Emerald was particularly innovative, wasn't it? Using specialized technology to enhance learning outcomes in disadvantaged communities? The codename, dropped into casual conversation, hit its mark. Kensington's composure cracked momentarily as he realized Eleanor wasn't merely investigating. She had been involved from the beginning and possessed insider knowledge he hadn't anticipated. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, Kensington suggested, his voice lowered. My study would offer the appropriate setting for such technical discussions. I think we're quite comfortable here, Marcus interjected smoothly. Among witnesses. Eleanor's hand moved to her pendant again, but this time she pressed a hidden mechanism within the jade. Instantly, holographic evidence of Kensington's crimes projected onto nearby surfaces, financial records, weapon schematics, and surveillance, photos appearing on walls and columns throughout the ballroom. Simultaneously, Marcus activated technology that overrode the venue's security systems, locking down all exits while broadcasting evidence to law enforcement agencies and securing the digital records against deletion. Gasps and exclamations rippled through the crowd as guests suddenly found themselves surrounded by evidence of international arms dealing, political bribery, and assassination orders projected throughout the elegant space. What is the meaning of this? Demanded a senator who had been pictured in one of the projected documents accepting payment from Kensington. Chaos erupted as Kensington's security team moved to neutralize the threat, but they were countered by Eleanor's network members revealing themselves throughout the crowd. The elderly teachers demonstrated combat skills that belied their apparent frailty, disabling younger opponents with precise efficiency. In the midst of the chaos, a silver-haired man approached Marcus from behind. Marcus sensed the presence and turned to defend himself, only to freeze in shock at the face before him. Older, weathered, but unmistakably familiar. The same eyes that stared back at him from his own mirror every morning. "Hello, son," said the man, after efficiently disabling an attacker moving toward Marcus. "Your mother and I have a lot of explaining to do." "Dad?" The word escaped Marcus's lips as a question, though the answer stood before him. Older, silver-haired, with lines etched into his face by decades of secrecy, but unmistakably James Washington. The same strong jaw, the same analytical eyes that Marcus saw in the mirror every morning. Around them, chaos continued to unfold. Kensington's security personnel struggled against Eleanor's surprisingly effective network of elderly operatives. Guests fled in confusion as holographic evidence of weapons deals and political bribes continued to project across the elegant walls of the ballroom. Through it all, father and son stood in a bubble of stunned recognition. "We need to move," James said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Kensington has a secondary protocol for situations like this." Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor appeared beside them, her expression complex. Joy at the family reunion tempered by the danger surrounding them. "The east exit," she said to James, falling into their old partnership with practiced ease. "The car is waiting." James nodded, guiding them through the confusion with the efficiency of someone who had navigated countless danger zones. He disabled 2 security guards with precise, economical movements that spoke of years of training and experience. They escaped, through a service corridor, emerging into the humid Atlanta night where a nondescript sedan waited with Franklin at the wheel. As they sped away from Kensington's estate, police sirens wailed in the distance, approaching the scene of the now exposed criminal operation. "We have 20 minutes before Kensington's contingency measures activate," James explained as they drove. "A safe house on the north side will give us enough time." The safe house turned out to be a modest cabin on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by dense trees that provided natural concealment. Inside, sophisticated communications equipment and security systems belied the rustic exterior. As Franklin secured the perimeter, the Washington family found themselves alone together for the first time in 30 years. The weight of unspoken questions filled the room like a physical presence. "You're alive," Marcus finally said, his voice caught between accusation and wonder. James nodded slowly. "At great cost, yes." "Why?" The single word carried decades of abandonment and confusion. James exchanged a glance with Eleanor before answering. "It's a long story, son. One that begins before you were born, with Project Emerald." "The weapons tracking operation," Marcus said, recalling the fragments of information he'd gathered. "That was only part of it," Eleanor interjected, removing her jade pendant and placing it on the table between them. Project Emerald began as a psychological research initiative during the Cold War, studying how certain minds process pattern recognition differently. "Your mother was one of the subjects," James continued. "Her natural abilities were exceptional. She could identify connections and predict outcomes that computer systems couldn't match. The intelligence community recognized the potential applications." Immediately, Eleanor's fingers traced the jade pendant. "They developed experimental treatments to enhance these abilities, treatments that worked but came with long-term neural consequences." She tapped her temple. "My current condition is the result." "I was a systems engineer," James explained, "assigned to develop technology that could replicate these pattern recognition capabilities. The goal was to create predictive systems for tracking weapons development and proliferation. But the technology had other applications," Marcus realized, pieces falling into place. "Applications beyond weapons tracking," James nodded grimly. "The algorithms could predict human behavior with disturbing accuracy, identifying potential dissidents before they acted, anticipating market fluctuations, manipulating public opinion through targeted information deployment. When we discovered the true scope of how our work would be used," Eleanor continued, "we tried to shut it down through official channels, but certain elements within the government had already recognized its potential for domestic surveillance and control. That's when we met Richard Kensington," James said, his expression darkening. "Then a rising intelligence officer partnered with private contractors. He recognized the technology's black market potential, selling predictive systems to authoritarian regimes, criminal organizations, anyone willing to pay. We gathered evidence of Kensington's operation," Eleanor explained. "But before we could expose him, he moved against us." "My accident was staged," James confirmed. "I was given a choice: disappear or watch my family die. Kensington's influence made official protection impossible." "So you became a ghost," Marcus said, understanding dawning. "And infiltrated his organization." "Yes. For 30 years, I've worked as Kensington's security chief, gathering evidence while sabotaging his worst operations from within. It was the only way to protect you both while building a case that would stick." "But you never contacted us," Marcus said, the old hurt surfacing. "You let us believe you were dead." "Any contact would have put you at risk," James replied, though. The pain in his eyes suggested the decision had cost him dearly. "But I watched over you from a distance. Your scholarship to MIT, your first venture capital funding, the government contracts that launched WashTech. I made sure those doors opened." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. "You've been manipulating my entire career?" "Guiding, not manipulating," Eleanor corrected gently. "We needed you to develop the technology in the right direction, ethically, responsibly, something Kensington would never allow. The algorithms that form the foundation of your AI systems," James explained, "are evolved versions of what I designed decades ago, influenced by your mother's cognitive patterns. You rebuilt and improved what I started, but with a crucial difference. Your systems prioritize human welfare in their core. Programming. Before Marcus could process this revelation, an alert sounded from the communications array. Franklin rushed in from his perimeter check. Kensington's dead hand protocol has activated, he announced grimly. Automated systems are releasing evidence, implicating thousands of people, some guilty, many innocent, designed to flood media channels with so much information that the genuine evidence becomes impossible to separate from fabrications. It's a scorched earth approach, James explained. If he goes down, he's ensuring the evidence against him becomes useless, buried in an avalanche of disinformation. Can we stop it? Marcus asked, professional instincts taking over despite his emotional turmoil. Not entirely, James replied. The system is distributed across multiple secure servers globally, with redundancies and dead man switches. But we might be able to filter it, separate fact from fiction, if we access the original Project Emerald database. That's what the pendant is for, Eleanor said, lifting the jade artifact. It contains a physical authentication key to access the secure server James built before his disappearance, a comprehensive record of every operation, every transaction, every name involved in Kensington's network. The system requires dual authentication, James explained. The physical key plus biometric confirmation from a Washington family member. We designed it that way to ensure neither of us could act unilaterally with such sensitive information. Which is why Kensington wanted both the pendant and Eleanor, Marcus realized. Yes, James confirmed. Though in recent years your biometrics would have worked as well. The system recognizes genetic markers. That's why the danger shifted to you once you became publicly successful. So what's our next move? Marcus asked, the immediate threat focusing his thoughts. We need to access the secure server before Kensington's disinformation campaign renders all evidence useless, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite her visible fatigue. The database contains verification protocols that can authenticate the genuine evidence. James took the pendant from the table, examining it with technical precision. The access point is at a data center outside the city, disguised as an academic research archive, but will be expected. Kensington's remaining personnel will be moving to destroy it once they realize what we're planning. Then we divide our forces, Marcus suggested, military training surfacing. Create a diversion to draw attention while a smaller team accesses the server. There's something else you should know, Eleanor said, her expression grave. The neural degeneration from my experimental treatments, it's accelerating. The symptoms I've been experiencing aren't just fatigue. My ability to recognize patterns, to process complex information, it's failing. She may not be able to authenticate the system, James explained gently. The biometric scan includes cognitive pattern matching. In her current condition, then I'll do it, Marcus said without hesitation. You said the system would recognize my genetic markers. It's not that simple, Eleanor warned. The authentication doesn't just verify identity, it requires navigating a cognitive maze based on pattern recognition. You'd need to process information the way I do. You taught me how to think, Mom, Marcus said simply. All those puzzles and games when I was growing up, they weren't just entertainment, were they? You were training me. A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. I couldn't tell you why, but yes, just in case this day ever came. James checked his watch. We have less than 3 hours before Kensington's disinformation becomes too widespread to counter effectively. We need to move now. As they prepared to leave, Marcus pulled his father aside. There's one thing I don't understand. If you've been gathering evidence against Kensington for 30 years, why wait until now to act? James's expression grew troubled. Because the technology has evolved beyond what even I anticipated. The autonomous weapon systems Kensington is trafficking now. They're based on corrupted versions of your mother's cognitive patterns, designed to predict and neutralize threats without human oversight. If deployed, they would fundamentally change warfare and domestic control systems forever. And my technology accelerated their development, Marcus realized with growing horror. Unwittingly, yes, James confirmed. Your innovations filled gaps in the original architecture, which is why we needed to act now. before the systems become fully operational. The implications settled heavily on Marcus's shoulders. The technology he had created to improve lives could instead end thousands of them if misused. The personal betrayal he felt at his parents' deception was overshadowed by the urgent need to prevent a greater catastrophe. "Let's finish this," he said firmly. An hour later, they approached the nondescript office building housing the data center. The structure's unremarkable exterior concealed one of the most secure private servers in the country, hidden in plain sight among academic research archives and corporate data storage. Their plan was precise. Franklin and Zoe would create a diversion at Kensington's main office across town, drawing security resources away from the data center. Meanwhile, the Washington family would access the server using Eleanor's pendant and Marcus's biometric authentication. As they prepared to move, Eleanor gripped Marcus's arm with surprising strength. "Whatever happens in there," she said urgently, "remember that pattern recognition isn't just about seeing connections. It's about understanding which connections matter. Trust your instincts. They're better than you know." The data center's lobby was empty save for a single security guard who recognized James immediately. "Mr. Lewis," the guard said, using James's cover identity. "Didn't expect you tonight." "Emergency. Protocol," James replied smoothly, using terminology that would register with Kensington's personnel. "Need to access Archive E7 immediately." The guard hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Of course, sir. You know the way." As they passed through security checkpoints, Marcus observed how completely his father had embedded himself in Kensington's organization. Every guard nodded with respect. Security systems disarmed automatically. At his approach, access doors opened without question. "They trust you implicitly," Marcus noted quietly as they entered a restricted elevator. "Trust built on 30 years of carefully managed loyalty," James replied. "I've saved Kensington's life twice, calculated risks necessary to maintain my position." The elevator descended deeper than the building's official blueprint suggested, finally opening to reveal a temperature-controlled server room humming with advanced technology. At its center stood a single terminal, outdated in appearance but connected to systems far more sophisticated than its vintage exterior suggested. "The authentication interface is deliberately antiquated," James explained, approaching the terminal. "Harder to hack remotely, less vulnerable to modern attack vectors." Eleanor removed her pendant, revealing a small data key concealed within the jade exterior. She handed it to James, who inserted it into a hidden port beneath the terminal. The screen illuminated with a complex pattern of symbols and images. A visual authentication system unlike any standard security protocol. "This is where it gets challenging," Eleanor said, her voice weakening. "The system requires navigating a cognitive maze based on my pattern recognition abilities." She attempted to engage with the interface, but her hands trembled visibly. After several failed attempts, she stepped back in frustration. "I can't," she admitted, defeat evident in her voice. "The connections aren't clear to me anymore. The patterns are slipping away." "I'll try," Marcus said, stepping forward. James placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. "The system will scan your retinal patterns, brainwave frequencies, and response times. It's looking for specific cognitive processes, the same ones your mother demonstrated during the original Project Emerald experiments." "What if I fail?" Marcus asked. "Then we lose our best chance to counter Kensington's disinformation," James replied honestly. "And the evidence against his network becomes just more noise in an overwhelming flood of data." Marcus took a deep breath and positioned himself before the terminal. The screen shifted, displaying complex patterns of seemingly unrelated images, numbers, and symbols. A retinal scanner activated, bathing his eyes in soft blue light as he began engaging with the system. The challenge was unlike any security protocol Marcus had encountered, not testing what he knew but how he thought. It required identifying connections between disparate elements, predicting pattern progressions, and making intuitive leaps based on minimal information. Minutes stretched into a tense half-hour as Marcus navigated the cognitive labyrinth. Eleanor watched with a mixture of hope and anxiety, occasionally offering quiet guidance, not direct answers, but gentle reminders of how to approach pattern recognition from different angles. "You taught me this," Marcus realized aloud as he worked through a particularly complex sequence. "All those pattern games when I was a child, they weren't just puzzles, they were training." "I couldn't explain why," Eleanor acknowledged, "but I knew someday you might need to think the way I do. It was the only way I could prepare you without putting you in danger." As Marcus approached the final authentication sequence, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. "Security breach at the main entrance," James announced, checking his phone. "Kensington's recovery team. They've realized what we're doing." "How much time do we have?" Marcus asked, not looking away from the terminal. "Minutes at most," James replied, drawing a concealed weapon. "Finish the authentication. I'll hold them off as long as possible." "James." "No," Eleanor protested. "We just found each other again." A lifetime of unspoken emotion passed between husband and wife in a single look. "30 years ago, I disappeared to keep you both safe," James said quietly. "Some prices are worth paying twice." Before Eleanor could object further, James moved to secure the entrance, positioning himself to create a choke point that would delay any intruders. "Mom, I need your help with this final sequence," Marcus called urgently. "The pattern isn't resolving." Eleanor forced herself to focus, analyzing the complex visual puzzle displayed on the screen. "It's not about what you see," she said after a moment. "It's about what's missing. The gaps in the pattern are as important as the elements themselves." With this insight, Marcus identified the solution, completing the authentication process. Just as gunfire erupted in the corridor outside, the terminal screen transformed, displaying a comprehensive database of Project Emerald, decades of intelligence on weapons trafficking networks, compromised officials, and technological specifications. Most critically, it contained verification protocols that could authenticate genuine evidence against Kensington's network while identifying the fabricated disinformation being released through his dead hand protocol. "We need to transmit this to Franklin's secure channels," Eleanor said, connecting a device to the terminal. "It will provide verification keys for law enforcement and intelligence agencies to separate fact from fiction in the evidence flood." As the data transfer began, Marcus heard his father engaged in combat outside. Without hesitation, he moved to assist, drawing his own concealed weapon. "Stay with the terminal," he instructed his mother. "Make sure the transfer completes." In the corridor, James was pinned down by 4 professional operatives using tactical formation to advance on his position. Marcus assessed the situation instantly, using his military training to identify the optimal intervention point. Moving with precision, he disrupted their formation, creating the opening his father needed to regain tactical advantage. Father and son fought in coordinated tandem, as though they had trained together for years rather than meeting for the first time in decades just hours earlier. "Your technique is familiar," James noted as they secured the corridor. "Special Operations Group? Delta initially, then a classified unit I'm not supposed to name," Marcus replied, securing one of the disabled attackers. "Seems we have more in common than I knew." A pained smile crossed James's face. "More than you can imagine." They returned to the server room to find Eleanor slumped in the chair, the data transfer complete but her condition deteriorating rapidly. "The neural degradation is accelerating," she explained weakly as they helped her to her feet. "Using the patterns for authentication pushed my brain past its tolerance point." "We need to get her medical attention," Marcus insisted. James nodded, grimly. "There's a research hospital connected to the original Project Emerald team. It's our best option." As they made their way to the extraction point, Marcus's secure phone confirmed that Franklin had received the verification data and was distributing it through trusted channels. Already, intelligence agencies were using the authentication protocols to identify genuine evidence amidst Kensington's disinformation campaign. "It's working," Marcus told his parents as they reached the vehicle. "The verification systems are cutting through the noise. Kensington's dead hand protocol is failing." Eleanor smiled faintly. 30 years of waiting. Finally worth it. 3 days later, Marcus stood at the window of a private hospital room, watching the Atlanta skyline as dawn broke over the city. Behind him, Eleanor rested comfortably, stabilized by treatments developed specifically for the neural conditions resulting from Project Emerald experiments. The aftermath of their operation had unfolded rapidly across international news channels. Richard Kensington had been apprehended attempting to flee the country. Dozens of his associates, including politicians, military contractors, and business leaders, were facing indictments. The weapons shipment scheduled for Southeast Asia had been intercepted, the autonomous system secured before deployment. The door opened quietly as James entered, carrying coffee cups and looking more relaxed than Marcus had seen him yet, though the vigilant awareness of a man who had lived undercover for decades remained in his posture. "The doctors are optimistic," James said, handing Marcus a cup. "The treatments can't reverse the neural damage, but they can halt the progression. With proper management, your mother could have years of quality life ahead." "And you?" Marcus asked. "What happens to James Washington now that Lewis, the security chief, is exposed?" A complex expression crossed his father's face. "That depends on several factors, including whether my son has room in his life for a father he's only just beginning to know." The question hung between them, addressing the deeper emotional complexities beneath their shared mission. The past week had thrust them together in circumstances that bypassed normal relationship development, leaving fundamental questions unaddressed. "You manipulated my entire life," Marcus said finally, voicing the hurt he'd pushed aside during the crisis. "My education, my career path, even my technological innovations, all guided toward completing a mission I didn't know I was part of." James accepted the accusation without defense. "Yes." "Why not tell me the truth? Bring me in when I was old enough to understand?" "We discussed it," James admitted. "Many times. Eleanor argued for telling you once you turned 25. I insisted the risk was too great. That knowledge would make you a target before you had the resources to protect yourself." He set down his coffee cup, facing his son directly. "I told myself I was protecting you, but the truth is more complicated. The longer the deception continued, the harder it became to imagine a way back." "How do you tell your son you've been alive and watching from the shadows for decades? That his achievements were partially orchestrated? That the father he grieved was a lie? So instead you let me believe you were dead while steering my life from a distance?" "Yes," James acknowledged simply. "It was unforgivable, even if the intentions behind it were protective. I won't ask for forgiveness, Marcus, but I am asking for a chance to know my son as he actually is, not through surveillance reports and career milestones, but as a person." Before Marcus could respond, a weak voice called from the hospital bed. "You two realize I can hear you, right?" Eleanor said, her eyes open but tired. "Covert operatives should really learn to whisper." Both men moved to her bedside, their personal reckoning temporarily set aside. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked, taking her hand. "Like someone used my brain for target practice," she replied with a hint of her characteristic directness. "But still thinking clearly enough to tell you both to stop dancing around the real issue." She looked between her husband and son with the penetrating gaze that had identified patterns others missed for decades. "We all made choices we believed were necessary. We all kept secrets we thought were protective. And we've all paid prices for those choices that can't be measured." Eleanor gripped Marcus's hand with surprising strength. "What matters now isn't assigning blame for the past. It's deciding what we build with the future we've managed to secure." "Always the teacher," James said softly, genuine affection in his voice. "Someone has to be," Eleanor replied with a weak smile. "You two would overthink yourselves into paralysis otherwise." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Zoe Taylor entered, carrying a secure tablet. "Sorry to intrude," she said, nodding respectfully to Eleanor. "But there's something you all need to see." She placed the tablet on the bedside table, displaying news coverage of the unfolding Kensington investigation. The focus had shifted from the weapons trafficking operation to the technology behind it. Specifically, the autonomous systems based on Eleanor's cognitive patterns. "Multiple governments are now racing to develop similar technology," Zoe explained. Kensington's operation exposed what was possible, and now everyone wants their own version. Out of the frying pan, James muttered grimly. This was always the greater risk, Eleanor noted. Not just Kensington's operation, but the proliferation of the technology once its capabilities became known. Marcus studied the reports, his mind racing through implications. We stopped one private weapons dealer, but we've triggered a government-level arms race for predictive autonomous systems. What do we do now? Zoe asked, looking between the three Washingtons. Marcus met his parents' eyes, seeing in them the same determination that had sustained their 30-year mission. In that moment, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. The recognition that whatever their past choices, they now faced a shared responsibility for the technology they had collectively brought into the world. We do what this family apparently does best, Marcus said finally. We adapt, we plan, and we take responsibility for the technology we've created. He turned back to the window, watching the rising sun illuminate the city. WashTech has resources that could help develop ethical constraints for autonomous systems, transparent oversight, human approval fail-safes, international monitoring protocols. Are you suggesting we go public with Project Emerald's full history? James asked, concerned. Not exactly, Marcus replied. But we can use what we know to guide development in ethical directions, influence standards before they're set by less scrupulous actors. Eleanor nodded slowly. A new kind of long game, not fought from the shadows this time, but in the open. With all of us working together, Marcus affirmed, making his decision in that moment. The hurt and sense of betrayal weren't gone, but they could be set aside in service of preventing a greater threat. Father, mother, and son, each contributing what the others lack. James extended his hand tentatively. Partners, then? Marcus took his father's hand, completing a circle that had been broken for 30 years. Partners. Eleanor watched her, husband and son with tears gathering in her eyes. Worth and blood, she murmured. In the end, that's what matters most. Outside the window, Atlanta continued waking to a new day, unaware that the Washington family had both ended one threat and committed themselves to countering another. Their complicated legacy of secrets and innovation now transformed into a shared mission for the future. The jade pendant lay on the bedside table, its purpose fulfilled yet its symbolism transformed. No longer a key to unlock secrets from the past, it now represented a different kind of inheritance. The responsibility that comes with knowledge, the obligation that accompanies power, and the healing that can begin only when truth finally emerges from shadow. What price would you pay for justice when the system itself is corrupted? Where is the line between vengeance and necessary correction? Eleanor Washington's story reminds us that discrimination is never just about one moment, but often the trigger that reveals hidden depths. If this tale of secrets and redemption spoke to you, like and subscribe for more stories that explore the complex intersections of justice, family, and power.